we go. So just a few friendly reminders. This presentation is based on statute and our understanding of social work licensing in Indiana. NASW Indiana does not speak for or on behalf of the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board. We do some advocacy and legislative work around licensing, but we do not have anything. We're not involved in the process. And there are certain questions that some of you put in when you registered, which is great, but some of them we can't answer because they are questions that only the board can answer. So we will try to direct you to those resources. Please note that a copy of this recording of this session and a copy of the slides from today will be posted on our website by Friday. So you can grab it, look at it, read it again. We'll also potentially update the frequently asked questions page that's also included with that information on our website. And again, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, or you can, the easiest way is to type in the Q&A section or in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer the questions as we go along. And with that, I am going to kick us off with, there we go. With our presentation. So again, please remember that this is based on our understanding of statute, and that none of this is legal advice, and none of it is, it's all the main final decisions are made by the board, not by NASW Indiana. So we're going to talk just briefly about who we are and kind of what we do. We'll talk about licensing and the process in Indiana, and then we'll talk just briefly about some licensing prep resources that we have on our website. So for those of you who don't know who NASW is, we began in 1955 with the merger of 7 organizations. We currently have 55 chapters across the country, including Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And our tasks really are around enhancing professional growth and development, maintaining professional standards, and advancing sound social policies. So we do advocate on behalf of the profession as well as on the clients that we serve in the communities that we work in. We are the largest organization of professional social workers, and we are your membership association if you're a social worker. If you're a member, we greatly appreciate it. If you're not, we hope that you would consider joining NASW. We advocate on behalf of our members, the clients that we serve, and provide a great, I can't even tell you the number of resources we have because I always leave something out, but it's a great way to connect with other social workers in the state and across the country. We have networking opportunities, job opportunities. We have professional development. If you're a member, we have a number of sessions that are free every year, as well as discounted prices. And most other chapters also provide a discount for events. And there's also plenty of opportunities to get involved in leadership within the chapter. Specific benefits include things like we have a newsletter. We do advocacy at the state and federal level, as well as in other states. We do training and education. You can get an ethics consult from NASW. There's malpractice insurance. I think one of the best things is that you can actually connect with professionals around the country and around the world, really. Anybody who's an NASW member is able to get into the My NASW neighborhood, or into the My NASW online community neighborhood. It is a neighborhood, I guess. Currently in Indiana, we have about 1,500 members. We have 7 regions. We have elections coming up, and that information is on our website. So if you're in one of the regions where we are accepting nominations and you're a member, we'd love to have you consider joining our board or any of our committees that we have. And just so that, because somebody always asks me about prices and I can never remember all numbers well. So dues are for a full MSW, DSW, or PhD is $236. If you're a student and you join, As long as you join before graduation, it's $60. Membership is good for a year, and you renew every year. And if you join as a student, you can get your transitional rate over the next 2 to 3 years, depending on if you're a BSW or an MSW. So with that, I will jump into what I know you all came to listen to, which is around licensing. And I always start this section talking about licensing and why it's important, because I think sometimes we think it's just kind of that thing we have to do and not necessarily understand the why for licensing. And the why for licensing really has to do with regulation and trying to support competent practice and provide a way for people to raise concerns if they have concerns about treatment that they're receiving. If you go back to the 80s, 1980s, I know it's a long time ago, but it's really not if you think about timing. But before we had licensing in the state of Indiana, anybody, anytime, any place could say they were a social worker and do therapy with clients and potentially hurt somebody. And there was no way for somebody to make that person stop. And so licensing is one of those things that helps assure that people are providing competent practice, that there's some kind of oversight. There's regulations that provide a way to address the concerns if you have a concern with a peer or with a social worker who is your therapist. There are all ways of being able to handle it and approach it. We also have title protection, which means that unless you have a license in Indiana, you can't call yourself a social worker, nor can you work in a position titled social worker or social work. That is just the way the statute's written in Indiana. And has been for, I want to say, since the late 80s, early 90s. We do have a licensing board. And so the General Assembly sets the rules or sets the statute, and then the board sets the rules and regulation for licensure in Indiana. So they actually are the ones who process and issue the licenses to social workers who meet the set of standards that are outlined in statute. They set the requirements for continuing education. They provide oversight and have a way for the public or other professionals to raise concerns about somebody's behavior as a professional social worker. They are the ones that actually hold the hearings if there is a complaint filed. And so the complaints go through the Indiana Attorney General's office, and then the board actually is the one that makes the decision and the final determination if there's if somebody did something they shouldn't have done. So when you think about licensing in Indiana, we have 3 levels. So we have an LBSW, an LSW, and an LCSW. So the only one of these licenses that require something beyond a degree is the clinical social worker. So the LCSW requires 2 years, at least 2 years of supervision. And there are specific timelines that I'll talk about in a little bit. But for the LBSW and the LSW, you just have to have that degree. You don't have to have any experience. You have to have the degree. So if you have a master's in counseling, you can't get an LSW. But if you have your master's in social work from an accredited program, you can submit your application and sit for your LSW license. Our licensing board is the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board. They have the oversight for 4 mental health professions: social work, marriage and family therapists, mental health counselors, and addictions. Social work is makes up the largest group of licensed mental health providers in the country. We also make up the largest number of licensed mental health providers in the state of Indiana. There are more licensed social workers in Indiana than there are of the other 3 professions put together. And again, I dropped the PowerPoint in the chat. We'll have it posted up on the website, but if you Google Behavioral Health and Human Services or Social Work Licensing Board, you will get to the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website. So when you're ready to do your license, the first thing you do is you go to the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board. If you've gone in the last couple of years or haven't seen it in a couple of years, it's changed. They've updated things. So you want to click on Application and Instructions. And then you, again, click on the Application Instructions and Requirements and pick the license that you're going for. So if you're going for the LBSW, the LSW, or the LCSW, there is specific information in each of those, as well as all of the other headings on here, for a checklist and the requirements, as well as links to other forms that you would need to complete. So if you haven't, and you're thinking about doing a license, or you're graduating soon, or you're thinking maybe you'll get your LCSW soon, I encourage you strongly to go to the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website and just read through the application process and the instructions. So this is what it will look like. And this is the application checklist for LSW. So just to be completely clear, it's a little different right now. But the application instructions, there's a $50 fee that everybody has to pay to submit your application. There's a question about, do you have to get, yes, if you want to get your LCSW, you have to get an LSW. If you want to work in the state of Indiana, you have to have a license. There is a very small group of exempt positions from licensing that don't require a license, but everything else requires either a license or a temporary permit. So if you don't have one or the other, and you have an MSW, you can't be doing, or a BSW, you cannot be doing therapy. You cannot see clients. Please you have to have a license. That is the most important thing to remember. And I'll explain things as we go through. So as of July 1, 2024, students that are in their last semester of their MSW program can submit your applications prior to graduation and sit for your test prior to graduation. As long as you can complete all of the information on the application, and instead of providing a transcript, you will provide a letter of good standing from your program. So your program director or their designee actually has to submit a letter with your application of good standing. BSW students will be eligible to test prior to graduation as of July 1, 2025. We just, somehow or another, we left BSWs out last year. But so you all can test prior to graduation, but you cannot get your license until you actually have your conferred transcripts. So this process of testing a little bit early will reduce the amount of time it takes for you to get your license. But really and truly, you just have to read through all of these questions and all of this information to understand how you fill out your application, and make sure you do every single step. The process is very clear about criminal background checks. You do have to pass that, but you don't complete your criminal background check until you actually get word from the board that it's time to do it. So again, just make sure that you read through these things very carefully, because it's really hard sometimes to remember all the steps. And I will tell you, I don't remember all the steps, but you can read through and figure it out. Once you know what you need to do, you will have to create an account with the state in order to process your application. It's also the way that you will do your renewal. It's the way that you can track your application. It's the way that you can submit new documents to them. Like if you have an address change, you can do all of that through this portal. If you have any problems creating your account, there will be a phone number on that page or an email address. That is who you contact. Don't contact the board if you have a problem setting up your account. because the board doesn't have anything to do with your accounts. They just can answer your questions about your applications. So let me check the, oops, there we go. Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions quick. So there's some questions about the background check. I would encourage you to go to the behavioral health website and actually click on that link that, whoops, hold on. Click on this link and see what it says. This is not a live active link, but click on that link and it will explain the steps around the background check. So read through all of those things. Again, almost everything that you need is here. You may have to read a little bit deeper in, but it should answer almost all of the questions that you have. Sorry, I'm looking at questions quick. So there's a question about renewals. I'll get to that in a few minutes too. So I just want to go back to the application. So on the application that you all will fill out, there will be a series of questions on the page. So one of the questions is, has disciplinary action ever been taken regarding any license, certification, registration, or permit you hold or have held? So if at some point in time you submitted an application to do something else and you never completed that application, or you did and then something happened and there was a disciplinary action, that is what the question is asking you, right? Have you ever been denied a license? If you submitted an application and you didn't meet a requirement and they denied the license, that is what they're asking you. The one that seems to get people caught every once in a while is the question that's got the arrow, which says, except for minor violations of traffic laws resulting in fines and arrests or convictions that have been expunged by a court, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever entered into a diversion? Have you been convicted, pled guilty? So the question that tends to get people tripped up sometimes is, have you ever been arrested? If you were arrested, there is a record of that. It will show up in the background check that happens. Saying yes, if it happened, is really important. I'm not saying it did to any of you, but it's really important. You need to make sure that you actually say and answer these questions truthfully, because it's not necessarily going to stop you from getting a license. But if you say, no, I've never been arrested, and your background check comes back and shows that you had been arrested when you were 18 and a half, and you didn't actually admit it, there's a problem, because now you've lied on this document, which is a legal binding document that you sign at the end saying that all the information's true, right? And so if something came up, if there's something you need to report, please make sure that you check the correct box and then that you submit an explanation of what happened. If you answer no when you should have answered yes, then you will have to provide more information to the board and potentially go to one of the licensing board meetings and talk to them and explain to them why you technically lied on a legal document. And again, it's not going to necessarily mean that you don't get to have a license. All it means is that you need to make sure that you tell the truth. And I know I said that a number of times, but this is where this question tends to trip people up, and I don't know why, but people don't always answer correctly, which then means that they end up in front of the licensing board. So, when you think about licensing, there is a test that is involved. The test is through the Association of Social Work Boards. You cannot get a license in Indiana, and you cannot test to get a license in Indiana unless you submit your full application to the licensing board. So the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board has to approve your application. They will then send you a number that you then use to register with ASWB to take your test. If you try to register to take a test before you've been approved by the board, you will not be able to do it. So you have to submit your application and then get your number and then get the approval, and you can go in and go to the ASWB website and register for the test through ASWB. I encourage you to go to ASWB and look through their website and see the information about where there are Pearson VUE sites, which is where the testing is now. It was a Pearson VUE, it moved, and now it's back. But there are locations all over the country where you can go and take the test. You can take the test any place that you would like, whatever's closest to you. I know a few people who actually left the state and went to another state to take their test. You can go wherever you want as long as ASWB knows where to send your test records or your number, your score from your test, to what state they're supposed to send it to. So, but all the information you need for ASWB is on their website, which is aswb.org. And I'm going to stop for a minute and check the chat. Are there, all right, so there's a question about if you fail the test. Now, failing the test is not, first of all, nobody's going to fail the test. If y'all get yourself prepared, you should be fine with the test. We have very high pass rates in this state. But that is not, a denial would be if you submitted an application and for some reason they decided that they would not award you that license, that would be a denial. Or they deny your application because you don't provide all the information that's needed. They know what happens with the test. When you're doing your applications, again, just please remember to read the instructions and read all the information and read all of the emails that they send you. If you're missing something and they send you an email saying you're missing something, if you don't understand what it is that you're missing, please ask them clearly. And they should be able to answer the question. Please remember that the people that you are in contact with, if you call the board, are not the board members. They are staff of the state of Indiana who help process and provide the administrative kind of clerical support for your licenses, right? So they don't have the authority to make the decision about does something count or doesn't it. That is up to the board. Just remember that. And honestly, I will tell you that the best thing you can do is to go into your portal and check your status of your application, because that is going to be a quicker way than calling them. Because if you call them, it may take a while for them to answer the phone, and then it just backs things up. And you should be able to find everything you need in the portal with your account. So, good question. If I have no interest in clinical work, is there any benefit to getting the LCSW? It is entirely up to you. The other 3 mental health professions in the state all have a license comparable to the LSW, but they have to, they can only hold those associate A-level licenses for, I believe, 3 to 4 years before they get their clinical license. Any of you can get your LBSW, your or your LSW, and you can work under those licenses for your entire career. You just have to be supervised. So if you don't get a clinical level license, you cannot go out and independently be in private practice. You can work with other folks in a small or medium practice, but you can't hang out your own shingle. You can't diagnose. But there are lots of people with LSWs who work an entire career and are very happy without ever getting a clinical license. So that is entirely up to you if you want to get your clinical license or not. In order to get your clinical license, you have to have met the experience requirements as well as the supervision requirements. The supervision, as of July 1 of 24, can all be virtual, but it still has to be face-to-face. So supervision cannot be, it cannot be by phone. It can't be by email. It would have to be on a HIPAA compliant platform. So a HIPAA compliant Zoom or some other platform, but you can now do 100% of your supervision virtually, as long as you meet those requirements. And it's to be 4 hours a month. And you can start collecting, counting, whatever word you want to use, your supervision once you have your temporary permit. So you submit your application for your LSW prior to graduation. You graduate and you take your test prior to graduation and you pass your test. Once graduation has happened, you need to submit your transcripts. Once you submit your transcripts and the state has verified that you completed the degree and you passed the test and you passed the background check and all those other things, they can award you a license. You can start working as soon as you have that license. If you get a temporary permit, you can start working as soon as you have that temporary permit. Again, you cannot work in the state of Indiana unless you have a temporary permit and or a full license. But once you do have those, you can start working towards your LCSW at that time. You just need to make sure that you follow the rules and that you are doing the sorry, I'm reading a question. So I graduate on Saturday with my MSW. Is under the impression we could study and schedule for the LCSW. No, you are not. There is nobody. The only way you can sit for an LCSW is if you get your LSW and work for at least 2 years under supervision of an LCSW in the state of Indiana, and then sit for and pass your LCSW. So I don't know who would tell you that you can get your clinical license without, we don't have, in Indiana, that's our clinical license and it's not available to anybody unless you have your LSW and 2 years of experience. So other states call licenses different things. So if you're in another state or looking at going to another state, they may call it something different than we do. I don't ask me why, I don't know, but that every state calls them slightly different things. So supervision, again, as of July 1st, 100% of supervision towards your LCSW can be virtual. This is different from the fact that you all have to have day-to-day supervision of your work if you have an LSW or a BSW, an LBSW, right? So this is a different kind of supervision. This is your clinical supervision. It is specifically to help you hone your skills so that you can then sit for your LCSW in 2 years. Again, it has to be synchronous. It has to be HIPAA compliant. And it cannot include telephone calls, electronic mail, or text messages. That might sound funny, but there are people who I think that text messages could be used for supervision, and they can't. So it doesn't work that way. All licenses for the Behavioral Health Board are renewed on even years at the end of March. I don't know why it's the end of March. It's the end of March. It's $50 for renewal. You have to do 20 hours of continuing education each year, 40 for the 2 years, and at least 1 hour each year of ethics. If you can do a minimum of Category 1 CEs, which would be this continuing education, that is where you get a certificate, and then you can do you have to do at least a minimum of 10 Category 1s, and you can do no more than 10 Category 2 CEs. So you could count this as a category 2 CE. We don't provide certificates. You would need to just record the proof that you were here in some form or fashion, and then you can claim it as a category 2 CEs. The definitions of category 1 and category 2 CEs, as well as the requirements around continuing education, are all on the behavioral health website. Again, it's really easy to find. Just look for continuing education. Please remember, if you've been licensed less than 2 years at the time of renewal, there are differences in what your CE requirement could be. But again, it's all explained on the Behavioral Health and Human Services website. And you just need to go through and figure out what it is that you need or don't need, based on the instructions and information that's available. So, oh, here you go. So I forget sometimes what's in my slide deck. So category 1 are formal programming, right? Workshops, conferences. Category 2 are self-directed. Again, if you've been licensed less than 2 years, your CE requirement is going to be less potentially than the full 40 over the 2 years. So just, you have to just read the instructions. So we also do have reciprocity. So if you have a license in another state, you should be able to bring that license to Indiana as long as you meet our requirements, and don't have any pending disciplinary action in the other state. Again, it's $50 for the application. There is an interstate compact that is slowly moving through the country. We are hoping to get it through in Indiana next year, which would make this even easier for licensing. But if you have a license in another state, there is reciprocity. And if you get your license in Indiana and potentially move to another state, you could potentially get your license there through reciprocity. So questions about licensing, again, I've said this and I will continue to say it, which is all the information you need is on the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website. And I'm going to see if I can make this work. I don't know that I actually can, but we're going to try to see if I can make this work where I can actually take you and show you the page. So can somebody, Nicole, can you tell me if that worked? Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Hopefully, can you all in the all right, I didn't do something right. This is the challenge of webinars. Okay, let me try again. Okay, whoops, there we go. Now you all should be able to see my screen. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Thank you guys for typing in the chat. I appreciate it. So this is the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board, right? So truly, if you have a question about applications, you can come in here and again, so here you go, continuing education. You can click on it, it will take you down and you can find out who sponsors and provides CEs. You can go in and look at social work examination and it explains everything as well as the website and who to email if you have questions. So renewal and reinstatement, it explains the continuing education options and opportunities, right? Of what can count and what can't count. So I really do encourage you, and I know some of you call and ask for all kinds of things, and truly everything that you need is here. So I would really encourage you to go, if you haven't gone, to go and look and spend some time and see what's on the page and how to find the information. If you this is, hopefully it just changed again, but if you go to the professional licensing agency, you can go into online services and it will walks you through the steps of how to apply for a license, how to renew your license, how to reinstate your license. All of those things are right here on this page. So everything you need is really here. And yes, I know it's not always been the best of websites, but it is getting better. Every day it gets better, I promise. I promise it gets better every day. Um, so okay, there's a couple questions in the Q&A too. So there's a question about if you don't pass the test, do you have to pay the application fee every time? You have to pay the testing fee. I believe you have to pay if your license and your temporary permit or your application and your temporary permit should be good for 12 months. I don't know if there's a fee if you have to retake the test through our board. I do know that there would be another fee through ASWB to pay to take the test again, and it's the cost of taking the test. And I do have information on the June prep at the end of this presentation, so I will. There are a couple questions about when do I test, when don't I test, those kinds of things. It's really entirely up to you. Um, if you if you haven't graduated yet and are in your last term, you can submit your application early and test before you graduate. It will take a couple weeks off of getting a license because again, you cannot work until you have a license. Please, as I said that, I know that some of you are saying, but so-and-so said they would hire me as soon as I graduate, whether I have a license or not. Employers do not get in trouble if you work without a license. You will get in trouble if you work without a license. So please make sure that you don't, that you're very clear with an employer that you know you need a license, whether they say you do or don't. The state of Indiana says that you have to have a license in order to work. And so please make sure that you get your license and follow the rules. If you don't test prior to graduation, if you wait until after graduation, you can submit your transcripts once they are available, which is usually 3 to 6 weeks after graduation that they become available from the school. You can then request that they get submitted to the Behavioral Health Licensing Board for your license. Once they've finished checking everything, you could get your temporary permit and get your approval to test at that point, which could be 6 weeks after graduation. So testing prior to graduation can reduce that time by about 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the timing of things. It's really up to you. I don't know that I can say that one way is better than another. It's up to you and kind of where you want to go with things. So a couple things to remember, and some of this is stuff that I have said, and I continue to say repeatedly because I think it's important. So that temporary permit is good for 12 months. If you apply and get your temporary permit and your license and your application approved to take the test, do not wait until month 10 to take your test. Because if you wait until month 10 to take a test, and for some reason you fail the test, you have to wait 90 days before you can take the test again. And if it's month 10 of your temporary permit, you have 2 more months, which means that there'll be a month that you can't work and do the work that you've been doing. And so again, you cannot work in the state of Indiana, legally work in the state of Indiana, except for a very limited number of exempt positions without a full license or a temporary permit. So just think about that when you're doing things. The temporary permits or temporary licenses are as good as a license and allow you to legally work in the state. The issue of billing and insurance and all of those other things, we cannot answer those questions because it would depend on what the contracts say and what the agreements are. So I can just tell you that if you go to work for somebody and they tell you you don't need a license and you don't get your license, at some point in time, you will likely get caught working without a license and you will get in trouble for working without a license. So just don't do it, please. Again, ASW requires a 90-day wait between testing attempts. There is a waiver that you can request from ASWB. We have nothing to do with that. It's all through ASWB, and it's up to them if they're going to allow you to do that or not. And you can get ADA accommodations, but just remember that it has to be it can't just be, I have an anxiety disorder, but it's never been diagnosed, right? It has to be something that meets the ADA requirements for accommodations. And the best thing that you can do is make sure that every step of the way, you are very clear about what that accommodation is. I have never, in the 8 years that I've been here, I've never seen the board say no to somebody's requested accommodation. But if you request, say, a test site where you would be the only person in the room, like a room just for you to test in, and you don't tell anybody that, and you show up the day of your test when it's scheduled, they may not have a room for you to use. So you just need to make sure that as you walk through the process, so when you submit the application, when you register on the ASWB website, that you are very clear about an accommodation. And when you contact Pearson VUE to set up your testing day, that you are very clear about what that accommodation is and what you need so that it can be met. And if you don't, just like any other accommodation, it has to be legally requested. So there are a few more questions in the chat. So with temporary permits, temporary licenses, so it's the technical term is a temporary permit. It's $25. You can request it on the application that you submit for your license to be able to sit for your license. That temporary permit allows you to legally work in the state of Indiana until you get your full license, or for 12 months for the BSW and the LSW. You have to fill out the application and have the whole application approved, which means that you have to have your full transcripts in order to get that temporary permit. So it doesn't just happen once you graduate. You actually have to complete the application process. So again, go to the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website and read through those instructions. If you are an MSW graduating in May, you can start your application today. It's probably too late to test prior to graduation, but those of you that graduate in August could apply and sit for your test before you graduate. There's a question about being eligible for LCSW if part of your hours are obtained while you're on a 1099. I am going to not answer that. We will not be answering that at all. That is a licensing board question. There are some concerns and some questions around being a contractor and who actually is supervising you. So you need to contact the board and ask them for guidance and information. We cannot provide that information because it's outside of our ability to, it's outside our decision-making at all completely. So, there were some questions about licensing prep. We do have 2 different options. So, we have a live virtual, class that will be on June 26th. All the information's on our website. It's with, Dr. Dawn Apgar. Registration gets you 6.5 hours classes, as well as access to, for 6 months, to an online community that virtual materials, virtual books, and an online community where you can ask questions, get answers, see other people's questions. It's pretty amazing setup. So that is on June 26th. It is 100% virtual. So you can register on our website. And then the other one that we have up on our website that people have liked is Pass It Pro, which is 100% virtual. It's all self-led. So it is completely up to you, like how you learn best. Some people do really well, 100% virtual, self-led. Other folks, me included, do better with the class and somebody talking me through things. So think about how you learn best, to think about what options you choose. I will also say that there are a ton of other options out there for licensing prep. My advice to you is, if you are going to go try something, to think about who's actually teaching it and who's created it. If it's not a social worker, are they actually going to be the best person to teach you about how to take the social work test? They might be able to teach you about standardized tests, but can they talk about our tests if they don't know them? So that's my only advice. There are tons of resources out there that you can use at any point in time that you would like. So a lot of local universities and alumni associations also have licensing prep courses. There's a couple that are like text you a question a day. There's all kinds of places that you can find resources for studying for the test. As well as, if you're an NASW member, you can go to the My NASW online community and put in a search, and you should be able to find some good resources and information. So again, resources, the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board. You can also look on our website, and we have some information on our website, as well as a copy of this recording, and we'll update the FAQ sheet for any changes that we need to make on that. All of that information will be up on the website, and we have 10 minutes, 11 minutes, technically 11 minutes. So I'm happy to answer other questions. So you can, again, put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. And I'm happy to answer them. Or I think I can make it work that you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. I think I can make that work. So are there other questions that I missed? My helpers that have been answering questions along the way. Sorry, I'm looking through the questions. Are there questions? Somebody, you can raise your hand and ask. I'm just looking through the questions to see if there's anything that I missed. All right, Nicole, we're going to try this with you. So I hit the button. So hopefully you just need to unmute. There you go.
Hello.
Yes.
So you just wanted me to use this as a...
Do you have a question?
Oh, no.
Okay. I was just testing, so it
I
worked.
was just wondering if you're using me as a testing guinea pig.
I was actually, apparently. So. But thank you for playing and making sure that I can actually really make this work, because it's been a while. It's been a while. All right. I'm going to mute you. And Teresa, did you have a question? You just need to unmute if you have a question. And if you raised your hand by accident, that's fine too.
No, I raised my hand on purpose.
Okay.
You mentioned that we should register this as one of the level 2 CEs, and I don't know how to register that.
You, when renewals happen, you fill out a form and basically attest that you have met all the requirements. And if it's a category 2, we do not provide any proof. You just have to document that you were here, and you would just keep record of it. And if anybody ever audited you, you just have to have the information that shows, that supports that you actually attended. So,
Got it. Okay,
um,
because I keep record of all of the training that I do. Even if I do a training and I don't always get a certificate, I keep record of that training in my training file.
yeah, and that's really all that you would need is um it could be, and again, I'm not the board, so this is I'm just giving you ideas, but you could um take a screenshot that shows the date and time, right? Of the beginning
Mhm.
and the end of a presentation that you watch. If you purchase something that was more of a category 2 and doesn't actually provide, you could again take a screenshot of what you purchased and how long it took you to review it, and that could be your proof. So
Okay.
it's just has to be whatever you feel would prove to the board if you got audited that you met your requirements. Um, so it's a
It's
weird thing, but that's what, yeah,
kind of an honor system that you keep your
yeah,
own record.
right.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
can
yeah.
do, yeah, so you have to do at least 10 category 1s with the CE certificates, and you can
Right.
do no more than 10 category 2s.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
as long as you're within those guidelines, there shouldn't be a problem. But again, remember, I'm not the licensing board, and so I don't get to.
No,
I
I
just tell you what
understand
you
that.
can do. So,
I understand that. I
okay.
just wanted to get some clarification. And
No,
I'm double checking. My last question is there's going to be a copy of this recording and slides on your website, correct?
yes. And I am trying to see if I can there we go. All right. I am going to try and drop it one more time into the chat. We've been having a few little technology issues, but I think I just successfully dropped the PowerPoint, the slides, it's a PDF, into the chat that you all should be able to grab. And so you can
I'm gonna check that right now and I'm
grab
gonna
it.
mute.
And we will also, this presentation as well as a copy of this recording will be up on the website by Friday. Just give me a couple. Sometimes it takes a day to get things up on the website because there's a couple of steps to the process. So just be patient, but I promise it will be up there. Okay. Other questions? I think I don't see any. So there have been some questions about like, who do I contact if I can't find my supervisor, if I can't. So, first thing is, please remember when you go and do your, when you do supervision, track everything that you do. Track it as you do it. Do not wait until the end to try and recreate 2 years worth of supervision. Keep track of everything, have everybody sign off on everything at the end of every day, at the end of each supervision session, so that if anything happens, you have the proof. If something weird has happened and you can't find the person, you can talk to the board. They might be able to come up with an option, but you do have to have proof of that supervision as well as proof of your work. So you have to be able to provide that information. And the only person who could give you any kind of options or other options or ways of doing it would be the licensing board. I can just tell you that there is a requirement that you complete certain supervision in order to get there. I know there was a question about, do we have any clinical supervision, those kinds of things. So NASW-Indiana, we do have a small list of members to NASW who have agreed to be listed to provide supervision to other NASW-Indiana members. I'm looking at trying to expand that out a bit. So we may have some other options and opportunities later in the year, but at this point, we have a very limited list that is available. 2 members, 4 members. I would encourage all of you, if you are getting your LSW or have your LSW, that you talk to your employer and that you ask before you take jobs to make sure. 9 times out of 10, you should be able to find a position that actually has an LCSW either on site or available, that your employer will actually provide you with that supervision, because it's to their advantage to provide you with that supervision, because it helps you get your clinical license. I know there are some settings where it doesn't work, and we are looking at some options to of how we can help with that. But at this point in time, I don't have any magic answers about finding supervisors, other than I would ask your employer if they have it. There's a question about, I completed part of my hours, but that she will sign off on everything when I go to apply for the test. Your supervisors do have to sign something when you go and apply for when you submit your application. But I guess what I'm thinking about is at the end of each of your supervision sessions, with a summary of what was discussed and an electronic signature or something that says that you both agree that you spent that hour together, and that would be different than, Haley, than the actual signing off on everything when you go to apply for your test. I hope that makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know why somebody wouldn't want to sign off, but maybe I missed something along the way. It's always possible. So continuing education. So NASW-Indiana, we do have a process, as well as the licensing board also has a process for any agency to get approval on continuing education for CE certificates and things like that. It's on our website. It's on the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website. There is a fee, I believe both we charge, and I believe the state charges a fee. And there are rules and regulations that have to be followed. The biggest and most important rule is that we don't approve anything after the fact. So the approval has to happen before you do the event. And I routinely have to say this, which is, we do not approve, like if you call me and say, can I approve this for you as a CE? We don't do that. We approve events for people who are providing those events. Everything else would be a category 2 CE. So it is 12:59, which means that we are almost out of time. I think I got most of the questions answered. If you are not sure who to call or what to do, I would encourage you to contact the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board directly. I am trying to grab something and put it in the chat. So this is the information off of the website. So Cindy Vaught is the board director and Dana is the assistant director, and the staff email is pla8@pla.in.gov. It is on their website, towards the bottom of their website. But I would encourage you all to go and read through what you find on the Behavioral Health and Human Services Licensing Board website. You can look at some of the stuff that's on our website, which is basically a repeat of their website, and that you walk through that process and email them if you have questions. And it is now 1 o'clock, and so we need to be done. I think that's it, unless there are any last questions. So if not, thank you all for joining us, and I hope that this was useful. And I just dropped the presentation in the chat one last time. If you have other questions, you can.
It did download for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Teresa. So again, we will have everything up on our website by the end of the week. And I hope that this was helpful and useful for all of you. And we appreciate your questions, because it helps us as we plan for future presentations. So with that, thank you all. I'm going to close out and have a great day and a great rest of your week. It's not Friday, so have a great rest of your week. Bye.